If you haven't lived very long, you may not know this, and if you've lived very long at all, you do. Life is hard. You know, life is hard. For some of you, you've been through some really, really hard things, and they can be hard relationally, family-wise, emotionally, financially, health-wise. And here's the thing, not to discourage you, but it's going to be hard. Your future, it's going to be hard. And what I love about the story and the journey with Kevin is he made some choices, and Becky made some choices. They chose joy. But what I don't want you to think is that choosing joy is about willpower. If I just have stronger willpower. Kevin and Becky weren't people that are just better and stronger, and they just bucked up and they said, it's cancer and it's difficult and we're afraid, but we're just gonna choose joy. That's not how it works. What we've learned in this series as we wrap it up is that you can choose joy when something happens, when you get these windows of perspective. When you begin to see life not through the human lens, but from the divine lens. Look on the front of your notes by way of quick review. When you're sitting here today, or whether you're watching or listening, as people are online with us right now, and you're going through a difficult time in a relationship or finances or your health, one of your kids, or you're sick of being single or sick of being married, you know, you can turn inward and it gets from bad to worse. But if you'll pause and say, wait a second, where's my focus right now? Is my focus upward on God and outward on others, or on me? You get perspective. If you can say, hold on, what's my purpose? Is my purpose just that comfort and happiness and everything works out for me, which it never does? Or how could God leverage this challenge to help people understand who Christ is? How could he leverage this to change me? How could he leverage this to build up some other Christians? And then you ask yourself, so where's my hope? Is my hope in this job? Is it in this family? Is it in this person I'm gonna marry someday? Is it that, finally I'm gonna get healthy again? Or is my hope in eternity? Is it I have an anchor that won't change? See, when you begin to ask those questions, you get perspective. And God never promised that he would eliminate the problems. What he promised is what we've seen with Kevin, is that he would be with you, that he would supply grace, that he would help you, that he would produce things both in you and through you that there's no explanation for other than the reality that Jesus is who he said he was. The last question and the last key word that we're gonna look at is the word expectation. And this, for me, is one of the most important ones. I have a good, really, really good friend. Their family, they've been at all of my kids' weddings. They were sort of like the grandparents or aunts and uncles my kids didn't have because we lived so far away. And it's a couple. She found out she has pre-cancer and some cancer, and she had surgery Wednesday, and I went to see her a couple days ago. Walked in, Bibi, how you doing? She's bright and bubbly and great. I said, but didn't you just have colon cancer surgery? She goes, yeah. And I said, well, I'm thinking, I'm glad you're doing so well, but how are you doing so well? This joyful look. She goes, wow, before they did the surgery, they said, we're likely gonna have to take about 12 inches out of your colon. They took 4. And then, if it doesn't fit quite together, there's a chance that you might have one of those bags on the side for a while, and then we'll come back and do another surgery. I don't have any bags. And not only that, but you'll be in here at least 6 days in the hospital, and that was Wednesday. She goes, I'm going home tomorrow. Now, just listen very carefully. Her expectations were a foot out of her colon, 6 days in the hospital, and the potential of wearing a bag on her side and another surgery. Her experience is only 4 inches. I get to go home in a couple days. Contrast that with someone else who walks in, they do an examination, they say, oh, some possible cancer. We're gonna put you to sleep. The colonoscopy didn't show what we needed to show. We're gonna take a long needle, stick it in there. We might have to do a short exploratory surgery. It doesn't look bad at all. We think it's benign. I've seen this a lot of times. You'll only be under for less than an hour. It's not a big deal. And you wake up several hours later and they say, we took 4 inches out of your colon. You're going to be in the hospital for 4 days. What's the difference? Oh my gosh. Your life and perspective and mine is geared around expectations. Had a young couple come to me, and they'd been married about 2 or 3 years. And they were committed to the Lord. They were involved in ministry. And we both waited. I said, what do you mean? We did not have sex before we got married. We did it God's way. And we thought it would be great. And we'd have great sex in our marriage. It's terrible. Expectation. I remember playing golf with a guy a couple years ago, driving around in a cart in Indiana. Really nice guy, had done really well, didn't start his family till late, had a couple small kids, and his wife had this burden for international kids. They adopted 3 kids from China. I mean, you know, money, time, energy, all that they've done. How could you do something better and more loving than adopting kids from China? And they just thought, you know, God's blessing, His favor. Well, you know what? His blessing and His favor was there. But all 3 kids have been in counseling. They've been in counseling. The medical bills have been off the charts. They've had 2 or 3 special surgeries. And he sat across from me and he goes, I didn't know if our marriage was going to make it. I didn't know if I was going to make it. And then he said this, I don't know if I would have done it if I would have known how hard it is. But my expectations were so out of whack, it's taken about 4 or 5 years to realize it's really, really hard. And then he smiled, and it's really, really worth it. Here's the question. Where's your expectations? What do you expect from God? What do you unconsciously think, especially if you listen to some of the current teaching? If you love Jesus, your marriage will be great. If you're single, this person is going to walk into your life. If you love Jesus and especially send some money to their ministry and just think positive thoughts, everything's going to be great. Your kids are going to turn out right. Everything's wonderful. Do you know why so many Christians are disillusioned? Because here's the principle. The distance between your expectations and your experience is disappointment. And if you have unrealistic, delusional expectations, you get devastated. Open your notes. Let's learn from the Apostle Paul very specifically, what can we expect from God and what does God expect of us? I feel like one of those radio shows where, and now we pick up the story where the Apostle Paul, right? He's in prison. He's chained to these Praetorian guards. He's wondering whether I'm going to be executed or whether I'm going to be released. His circumstances are terrible, but he has an upward focus and an outward focus. He's asking the question, what's my purpose? And now he doesn't know whether he's going to get to see this Philippian church that he loves deeply or whether he's going to die. And he's gotten some reports from one of their members, Epaphroditus, and there's some disunity in the church. And there's also a culture in Rome and a culture in Philippi that is, anti-Christian. It's described as these are the people that have turned the world upside down. And in Acts, it describes them as everywhere people speak of this sect negatively. So if you feel like the world's getting a little harder for Christians in the United States, if you feel like there's some persecution happening, if you think that you're labeled, they've got this on steroids. And so in his final thoughts about choosing joy in chapter 1, he wants to set clear expectations. He wants them to understand, look, this is what God expects of you in terms of your behavior, in terms of your beliefs, and in terms of your boldness. And then he's going to say, but I want you to also know this is what you can expect from God. Because if you don't get clear, accurate biblical expectations, you can actually have a pretty good life and be miserable because you think it ought to be a perfect life. In one of my deepest times of marital struggle, and after lots of counseling, and I had such skewed expectations the first few years, I remember reading a line by Francis Schaeffer in one of his books, and he just said in passing, you know, a lot of people give up on a good marriage because it's not a perfect marriage. And I was one of those people that privately inside it wasn't perfect, it wasn't what I thought, every area wasn't. And so I want you to begin to ask yourself, what's the issue that you're struggling with, or the person? And then I want you to listen carefully, because God's going to tell you, this is what he expects of you. And by the way, when you give to God what he expects of you, there's this domino effect where he begins to provide for you what you need. And he changes what happens on the inside. So with that, we pick it up. Paul says, this is my final lesson. What does God expect? He expects consistent conduct. Verse 27, whatever happens, he's finalizing literally, at all costs, conduct yourselves in a manner worthy of the gospel of Christ. Circle the little word, manner worthy. It's an interesting New Testament word. The Philippians would immediately recognize where he's going. He's kind of taking part of their personal experience, and he's going to give them this little parallel. Philippi was a Roman colony. Now, it's not all that close to Rome, but there was a war earlier, and between some generals and Caesar, and the little town of Philippi decided we're going to go with Caesar, and Caesar won, and so Rome made them an official colony. And to have citizenship was like, whoa. I mean, there were privileges, the Roman army, all the aqueducts, everything that came with being a Roman citizen. Philippi really felt like, wow. But there was also responsibility of being a Roman citizen. You paid taxes to Caesar, there's certain laws that you kept, there was a certain way that you would be aligned. And so this word, really what he's saying is, here's what God expects. At all cost, literally. Live like a citizen of the kingdom of God. He said, you're getting pressured. There's persecution. He's going to tell us in just a minute, you're experiencing the same conflict, the same persecution, the same difficulties, both within and without, that I am. Here's what you got to do. You need to be one of those Christians that actually lives like a Christian. I don't know where I heard that before. But after traveling around probably 6-7 years ago, and after kind of traveling around America and teaching in a lot of churches and being with pastors, and then I had a suspicion, and then I remember picking this book up by John Dickerson called The Great Evangelical Disaster, and he looked at its research, as you've heard John many times, and he started to talk about that the numbers of genuine Christians in America is highly inflated. They're more hated. The church in general is going bankrupt next 15 or 20 years at the current rate of giving and commitment. The morality in the church, he goes through and basically does a diagnostic evaluation of born-again evangelical people who actually believe the Bible, following Jesus, and says they're on life support. The church in America is descending. And this sparked a movement among pastors. And the answer, he said, is discipleship. And that's really how God connected our hearts. And what the Apostle Paul is saying back then was, the problem with the Philippians is you're in danger of being Christians that don't live like Christians. Your behavior, your morality, your finances, your priorities, your family. You say you love Jesus, but your beliefs and your behavior is telling two different stories. And I don't know, when I grew up, when your beliefs said this and your behavior said this, we called it hypocrisy. And what God wants is, we're never going to be 100% aligned, but what he wants is integration. He wants alignment, not perfection. The alignment between what I say and how I live. The alignment where my words, my life, my energy, and my money align with what I say I believe. And when they don't, it's not that I'm all terrible person. I ask God to forgive me, and I'm honest and vulnerable about I'm still on the journey. And what Paul is saying is this is what God expects. And then the very next line, you can imagine them thinking, well, how would you ever know for sure whether you're a Christian who's living like a Christian, whether you really are kind of a kingdom citizen living consistently? Well, in the very next verses, he explains. He says, what does it look like, this consistent conduct? Then whenever I come and see you, or only hear about you in my absence, I'll know that you stand firm in one spirit, contending as one man for the faith of the gospel, without being frightened in any way by those who oppose you. And this will be a sign to them that they will be destroyed, but that you will be saved, and that by God. In essence, he says, okay, now, if I die, I'm not going to get to see you again. If I live and I'm released, I'm going to come see you again. But whether I see you again or don't see you again, let me give you 3 specific ways that God measures whether you're living a consistent life, a life that's aligned with His purposes and His will. Now, I'd like you to circle 3 words, and I tried to make it as easy as possible. You notice they're in bold, right? Okay? I want you to circle. He says the first thing is that you're standing firm, and then underline in one spirit. He said, and I'll explain it in just a minute. You're standing firm in a culture that is against you. But notice you're doing it in unity, in one spirit. You're together on this. Second, circle the word contending as one man. Literally, it's one soul. You're in this together, but you're contending for the faith. Put a box around the word faith. This isn't private faith. He says, you're contending, you're striving, you're in mortal combat. The word was used for gladiators going arm in arm and fighting against other people. You are contending for the truth, the doctrine, the reality that Jesus is God, that the second person of the Trinity became a man, that He rose from the dead. These narrow, absolute, crazy claims based on His resurrection and His teaching, that He said the Word of God is true, that the Old Testament is true, that what I have shared with you, Paul is saying, what was written in the prophets, the law, and the Psalms, and then predicting what the New Testament writers, he's saying, I want you to contend, to battle for the faith. And then third, he says, don't be frightened. Do it without being frightened. The word here was a word used for a noise or something that would spook horses and they would stampede. He says, don't let persecution, don't let what your boss thinks, don't let what's politically correct, don't want what everyone says, don't let labels that people are giving you in the 21st century, don't let it frighten you to where you shrink back and become sort of the secret agent Christian. He said eternity is on the line. People's lives, people's souls. People don't have to believe the right thing, but the consequences and the pain of what happens when people turn away from God are devastating. And so he says those are the 3 ways that you'll know that you're standing firm, that you're living the life, that you have a consistent conduct. And then he says when you do that, it'll be a sign. Literally, it's a token. It'll be a proof. And after I explain these, I'll tell you why it's a sign and how it demonstrates the future of those who oppose you and how it also demonstrates your future because of your commitment and boldness. Let's go through these 3 words. It says, stand firm. Literally, don't give up. Don't give up. Anybody here ever get discouraged and feel like, I don't have any biblical grounds, but the world says, you shouldn't be this unhappy in this marriage this long. I think I'll give up. All the other salespeople are padding their reports. I'm going to give up. I know I should take a stand here in the hospital about this issue about life, but I might lose my job and I'm afraid. I think I'll give up. I know what the Bible says about sexual purity and all the stuff that's happening in the world, but, psychology's come a long way, and I can't imagine that Jesus would really expect us to have sexual purity and not live together. And how bad can it be? I look at a few pictures now and maybe more then, and everybody does it. I know my finances don't really reflect my heart, but there's a lot of pressure and there's financial demands and life is really hard. And God certainly can't expect me to give back, the very first and best. 10%, I can't even live on what I'm going now. So what we have is a church that is in danger of shrinking back and giving up on what they believe, both corporately and giving up individually. You got to hang tough in tough times. It's in the difficulty, it's in the pain. You have to lean in when it's hard. At the end of the day, it always revolves around this one issue. Do you believe and trust God? Do you believe and trust God enough that if you take a stand, that even if you get fired, God can get you another job? If you put your priorities where they need to be, and your job says, oh no, I need you here from 6:30 in the morning till 9 at night, and you say, that doesn't square with the kind of man, the kind of woman that I need to be for my family, and they say, well, go someplace else. Are you willing to, by faith, set some boundaries and say, I'm going to have consistent conduct. I'm going to live by God's grace and by his power in the community of people like a Christian. Not sort of keep coming back. Because see, when you do that, that's when you're light. That's when we're light. That's when we're salt. That's when we make a difference. The conclusion of the secular world today is there is not a nickel's worth of difference between the average Christian and the average non-Christian. And they see how most of us live and where our priorities are and our behavior and our morality, and basically are saying, why should I trust in your Jesus? I mean, that's harsh, but that's the lay of the land. But here's what I'm excited about. I get to be a part of a church, and there's a lot of exciting, dynamic churches, and God is doing around America and around the world that are taking a stand. In fact, this first word is about really our behavior. The second word, contending for the faith, it's about our beliefs. It's about standing up for what we believe. It's battling, but winsomely, lovingly, not angry. But it's saying that there's certain things that are true. I was praying this morning, and I was thinking about this, and I thought of, I get to do in one of the most progressive areas in all the United States with a group of people that are willing to take a stand and do it lovingly, and then not only pair the truth, but pair the truth with acts of love and compassion and kindness. Let me just tell you something. This is, I want to thank you. First of all, John would get in big trouble teaching that book in a lot of churches all across America. After that book came out, we did a small group series. We did something on culture shock that I actually taught here, and we talked about life, abortion, human sexuality, politics. What does the Bible actually say, and how do we stop bringing heat but bring light? And then you all gave me the opportunity to go around the country and take multiple pastors and churches to say, we're going to contend for the faith. Those are very unpopular things, and I would totally agree. Sometimes they've been presented in such harsh, angry, difficult ways, but shared lovingly, life matters. God's not confused about men. He's not confused about women. He's not confused about marriage. And when we violate and when the culture pushes us where we shrink back, the consequences and the pain. I can't tell you how many people I've counseled out of the lifestyle that are suicidal and hurting and difficult. And there's all this stuff out there that says our rights and stuff like that. And I meet the people in the pain and the struggle. I had a guy just recently, just a month or so ago, and he waited till quite a while at Saturday night service and said, am I welcome here? I said, what do you mean? Of course you're welcome here. He goes, well, I'm gay. I said, now is that a behavior or an identity? And he looked at me like, what do you mean? I said, we have people that have temptations for affairs, pornography, lying, stealing. This is a church filled with people that have all kinds of issues. Gay is not your identity. There's absolutely zero proof, scientific evidence that you're born this way. You have some sexual confusion and you're attracted to the same sex. We have people in our church that are highly attracted to the opposite sex and have lots of problems. So you are as welcome as all the other liars, affairs, fornicators, and cheaters that go to our church. That's who we are. But what I want you to know, that's who we are. I mean, the church has been but we're on a journey together. God will speak to you. He'll change your thinking and your life from the inside out, and you'll make progress, and you'll probably mess up some, just like everyone else here.